Singapore is a tiny country, smaller than New York City. But when it comes to GDP per capita, it ranks second in the world and first in Asia. But would you believe that just 6 decades ago, Singapore was so fragile that it actually merged with another country, Malaysia, just to survive? Then something happened. Just 2 years after that merger, Singapore separated and became an independent nation. So what led to this split? How did a resource-starved island with no farmland, no oil, and even imported drinking water transform into a global economic powerhouse? Today, we unravel the shocking story of Singapore's rise, from colonial outpost to billionaire's paradise. The story begins in the early 19th century, when the British East India Company was expanding its control over the Indian subcontinent. The Straits of Malacca had become a critical trade route, and Britain wanted a strong foothold in this region. At the time, most of Southeast Asia was under Dutch control. While the British already had trading ports in Penang and Bencoolen, they wanted a more strategic location. That's when a British official named Sir Stamford Raffles arrived at a small island off the southern tip of the Malay Peninsula, Singapore. Why Singapore? The island had deep waters, ample timber for shipbuilding, and it sat right above the Malacca Strait, making it a perfect location for a port. Plus, the population was minimal. Through an agreement with the elder brother of the Sultan of Johor, the British secured the rights to establish a trading port in Singapore, much to the anger of the Dutch. Eventually, tensions between the Dutch and British were resolved through the Anglo-Dutch Treaty of 1824, under which Britain gave up Bencoolen, and the Dutch relinquished claims over Malacca and Singapore. Soon after, trade flourished, especially after the Opium Wars in China. Immigrants from China and India poured in, and by the end of the 19th century, Singapore's population had reached 200,000. During World War II, Singapore fell under Japanese control. After Japan's defeat in 1945, Britain returned, but the region's people were now demanding independence. In 1957, Britain declared Malaysia an independent country. However, Singapore was not part of the Federation initially. Britain instead granted it partial self-governance, and in the 1959 elections, Lee Kuan Yew of the People's Action Party became Singapore's first prime minister. Singapore was a tiny island with no natural resources, only a strategic port. For survival, it wanted to merge with Malaysia, hoping that unity would bring stability. After a referendum and lengthy negotiations, Singapore officially joined Malaysia in 1963 under the Malaysia Agreement, alongside 2 other former British colonies, Sarawak and North Borneo, now known as Sabah. While Singapore separated just 2 years later in 1965, Sabah and Sarawak remain part of Malaysia to this day, forming 2 of the country's 13 states. Both are located on the island of Borneo, a region often referred to as East Malaysia. Under the Union Agreement, Singapore would hand over 40% of its revenues to the federal Malaysian government. Both sides agreed to form a common market within 12 years. Malaysia would control defense, foreign policy, and internal security, while Singapore would manage domestic affairs. Singapore was also given 15 seats in the Malaysian federal parliament. Despite high hopes, the merger lasted only 2 years. In 1965, Malaysia expelled Singapore, making it an independent country, even though Singapore hadn't asked for separation. So, what went wrong? Singapore's ruling party, the People's Action Party led by Lee Kuan Yew, and Malaysia's dominant party, the United Malays National Organization, clashed heavily. Singapore had a large ethnic Chinese population, making up nearly 60%, many of whom dominated business. UMNO, being anti-communist and pro-Malay, feared increasing Chinese influence. They advocated for Malay-first policies in jobs, education, and politics. In contrast, the People's Action Party believed in equal rights for all ethnic groups. This ideological divide triggered racial tensions and even violent riots, causing loss of life. Economically, Singapore had agreed to share 40% of its revenue with Malaysia. But Malaysia later demanded even more to accelerate the common market. For struggling Singapore, this was unaffordable. With rising ethnic tensions and economic disputes, Malaysia's Prime Minister saw no solution but to cut ties. On August 9, 1965, Malaysia officially expelled Singapore from the Federation, abruptly forcing the small island to become a sovereign state, completely on its own and unprepared for independence. In a historic and emotional televised address, Singapore's Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew broke down in front of the press, calling it a moment of anguish. Fighting back tears, he said,
For me, it is a moment of anguish because...
As he spoke, he paused to wipe away tears, visibly shaken by the weight of the moment. It was clear that this separation, though forced, was deeply personal for him, a painful departure from a vision he had believed in his entire adult life. Yet, in the years that followed, Lee Kuan Yew led Singapore through one of the most remarkable economic and social transformations in modern history, turning a struggling island into a global powerhouse. After separation, Singapore was in a dire state. No natural resources, limited land, and even food had to be imported. Yet today, Singapore is known as an Asian tiger, with a per capita GDP second only to Luxembourg globally. In the 1960s, most countries had high tax rates, which discouraged foreign investment. But Lee Kuan Yew kept taxes low, making Singapore highly attractive for businesses. Investors flooded in, creating economic momentum and job opportunities. Singapore began to stand on its own economically. Lee Kuan Yew realized that attracting companies wasn't enough. Singapore needed skilled citizens. At the time, much of the population lacked formal education, so the government allocated a significant portion of the national budget to developing a strong education system. To build world-class standards, they brought in expert educators from around the globe, including from prestigious institutions like Harvard, Oxford, and MIT, and actively sought guidance from these leading academic centers. This focus on building a skilled workforce played a critical role in Singapore's transformation. Today, its education system ranks among the world's best. Singapore had no natural resources, but it did have a world-class port at a prime maritime location. The government fully leveraged this asset, turning it into one of the busiest ports in the world. They also developed shipbuilding and repair industries, bringing in more foreign currency. Lee Kuan Yew believed foreign investors would only come if the government was transparent and corruption-free. He enforced strict anti-corruption laws, turning Singapore into one of the least corrupt countries in the world. According to Transparency International's 2024 report, Singapore ranked third globally for least corruption. Singapore consists of one main island and 60 smaller islets, covering only 728 square kilometers. Interestingly, the name Singapore comes from Singapura, which means Lion City in Sanskrit, though lions never actually lived there. Since independence, Singapore has increased its land area by 25% through land reclamation to accommodate population growth. With little land for farming, Singapore turned to vertical farming, growing crops in stacked layers, and rooftop farming, helping reduce food dependence and urban heat. Water scarcity is a major challenge for Singapore, and like Israel, it relies heavily on advanced water treatment technologies to meet its drinking water needs. In fact, Singapore still depends on Malaysia for a significant portion of its freshwater supply. Under a long-standing agreement signed in 1962, Singapore receives 250 million gallons of raw water daily from Malaysia. After treating the water, about 2% of the treated water is sold back to Malaysia. This agreement is set to expire in 2061, but Malaysia has expressed dissatisfaction with the current terms and has, on several occasions, called for a renegotiation. Singapore's transformation is symbolized by landmarks like Marina Bay Sands, an iconic skyscraper with a boat-shaped rooftop that houses a luxury hotel, casino, and shopping mall. Yet, this image of modern luxury contrasts with the realities of everyday life, such as the high cost of car ownership. In Singapore, owning a car is considered a luxury due to steep taxes and the requirement of a certificate of entitlement, which costs thousands of dollars annually. From a fragile, unwanted island to a global economic powerhouse, Singapore's journey is nothing short of a miracle. It's a story of smart leadership, bold decisions, and a relentless focus on progress. Let us know in the comments, what surprised you most about Singapore? And if you found this video interesting, don't forget to give it a like and share it with others. Make sure to subscribe to our channel for more fascinating videos like this one.